Right then, we all know about the H2S now, the younger but more fit and agile brother to the H2D. And yeah, I'll say it again, I much prefer the H2S over the 2D because it gives the larger build volume we wanted of a Bambu printer without any of that confusing limit of only being able to use some of the print bed depending on the nozzle or whatever. When I buy a Bambu as a 3D printer user, there's an expectation that I'm simple-minded. Yeah, I am. And with that, I expect simplicity from the products. So the TLDR is, whilst I like the multiple nozzles on a printer, I'd much prefer Bambu to deliver the multi-tool head approach, and I don't think I'm alone on that. But it's not like the H2S doesn't have its own limits either, which is why this video isn't about 3D printing on a 3D printer, it's about frickin' laser beams. I had to say it, because now when you buy a new Bambu, you've got an option. To laser or not to laser? That is the question. Well, it's one I hope to answer today as we have a look at what these are like as laser machines. Hi, I'm Ross and this is Fohammer Videos. So yeah, in case this is the first video of mine you've stumbled across on the H2s, I've done a review of the H2S and the H2D separately as 3D printers. So if you're looking for the basic spec of the machine you're looking at, or what the features mean practically to you as users and how they perform, check those videos out. But this is going to focus on laser functions entirely. And I'm glad to do this video because I'll be straight up front. I am a Bambu fanboy. I'm a guy all about how brands deliver their user experience and the practical impact that makes on these products. And Bambu are the absolute kings of brand-specific UX in the FDM printer space. But as I started reviewing home laser machines, specifically with the intention of having a perspective to measure Bambu against, I'm happy this now lets me show you that whilst I am a fan, I'm certainly not a shill, because I'll say it up front, when it comes to lasers, Bambu have some maturing to do in this space. So let's crack on. The first thing to point out on the laser machines is that they've got green doors and fully opaque glass lids. This isn't simply an aesthetic choice to differentiate laser from non-laser version, both the colour and the material used is intended to block out the specific wavelength of light that is output by the standard diode laser. However, I'll talk about this more shortly when we cover laser safety considerations, as there are more elements that come into this. In fact, the majority of elements added in the laser version of these machines is around safety. Speaking of which, the parts you need to install. Lasers can produce a lot of smoke, and many materials release gases, vapors, and particulate matter that range from irritating or flammable to outright toxic or carcinogenic. So those will need to be vented outside or connected to an internal smoke filter, the latter of which I have and will come back to after looking at the laser features. Stick with me, this will all come together. Next up is the emergency stop. As standard, the H2 machines have little red circular keys that go in the back. If this is unplugged at any point, the printer won't power on. The laser version lets you swap this for a cabled E-stop that mounts to the right side of the printer by wedging it under a discrete recess. And again, at any point this button is depressed, power is cut from the whole printer, complete and immediate shutdown. And this also has the same red key in the back that needs to be present in order to power up the machine, but this can also be taken away to prevent unauthorized use at any time. But when it comes to making sure that your machine is ready to be used as a laser machine, or at least swapped to one, those are pretty much the full install steps beyond the initial unboxing of the printer, ventilation and a safety switch. These next two elements are essentially hot swappable depending on when you want to go between printing mode and lasering mode. So first up is obviously the laser module itself. On the H2S you can only currently choose the 10-watt diode module, and I'm saying currently because I expect a future where they'll release at least an IR module, if not also the ideal possibility of 20-watt versions of their lasers. Again though, if this is possible, we'll come back to that. The limitation here is due to the size of the power supply pre-installed in the H2S, which is smaller than that of the PSU in the H2D, and that one will allow us to use up to 40-watt diode lasers at present. But either laser module easily just swaps in. Remove the toolhead's faceplate, pull off the spinny dial, and simply slide the laser module on and clip it into place. You will also need to attach the air assist hose, and whilst maybe you should take that cable out when going back to printer mode, I've had no issue just leaving it in and tucking it back on itself. After that, there's just one final cable which plugs into a port on the top of the toolhead. And as soon as that's connected, assuming the power's on, the printer immediately understands it's now in laser mode and it opens up the dynamic vents on the back and the top. And just like when it's printing, the top vent is fresh air in and the rear vent is bad air out. The only other thing to install is the laser cutting plate, and just like any normal build plate, this has angled extrusions on the back edges in order to align this perfectly on the bed. This plate has serrated bars that you can install across it, which raises your material from the base of the platform so that when you're performing a laser cut operation, the waste material can fall away. And these bars can be installed in multiple configurations depending on the size of what it is you're lasering. And I can see that Bambu also sell a mesh panel, which is helpful for smaller materials because it's got fewer gaps. I'd also like to see a proper honeycomb plate, as these existing bars do sometimes generate a bit of flashback, which can sometimes create burns on the back edges of cut material. Now on the top surfaces, this is minimized because the laser module has that built-in air assist. Essentially, this is a small air pump and a hose to blow away smoke, soot, and a bit of heat to prevent top surface scorching. And if you get a H2 with the laser module initially, so from the factory as a combo laser machine, it comes with an internal air compressor. If you get the non-laser version and then upgrade later, that air assist compressor is an external device. There's also a bird's eye camera that can capture an image of the bed from an oblique angle at the front. The software then applies a perspective correction so it appears as if you're viewing from a perfectly top-down scan. But like all lasers with fixed cameras, this relies on some level of correcting optical distortion, so they're never truly accurate. I actually spent some time engraving X's on different areas of the bed and then taking a photo after without moving the part to see how close it was, and honestly, of all the types of machines I've tested, this was pretty darn close, until I artificially added quite a bit of height to the plate and noticed a larger offset. Now hopefully this can be corrected by software in time, but it's not uncommon that cameras on lasers still aren't 100% accurate. This one's still solid, but I'd like to see any brand incorporate a camera into the tool head and then mesh together a full top-down scan of the build area, which should be partially possible here considering there's a LiDAR scanner. Now speaking of build area, despite the 2D's combined 350 by 320 area and the 2S's 340 by 320 area, the laser working area is only 310 by 270 millimeters, and that depth drops even further to 250 millimeters if you use the 40 watt module. This area is also different to both the cutting and pen plotting add-ons, but I'll cover those in a separate video. But in any case, the laserable depth is shy of the standard 300 by 300 millimeter materials that Bambu sells, and it's another reason why I'll say again, I do think it's a mistake that Bambu didn't give us equal depth to width on all of these H2 machines. So that's the hardware. When it comes to actually using the machine, well, on your first install, the UI does a great job of walking you through the initial calibration. One of the most important steps in setting up a laser is determining the accurate focal distance, because as laser light comes out of the diode, it's focused through a lens to a specific focal point. If you've ever done the experiment of sunlight through a magnifying glass for whatever reason, you psycho, it's basically that on a micro scale. But that also means if the laser is too far from the focal point, it won't be sharp, and too close, the same thing. So the first thing the machine does is etch some lines into a piece of card and use the LiDAR to determine which is the thinnest so it can understand the best focal distance. So that part is completely automated. Now the workflow in the software should really be load your material, take a photo with the bird's eye camera, measure the height with the LiDAR, place your design and click make, like the machine is a good boy. But that's not quite it, not yet. And when you first use the software, it offers a sample project to understand their version of the correct journey. Now I skipped it to test how intuitive it is, and well, I'm also lazy and just wanted to get on with it. And well, yeah, for Bambu, not so much. Unlike Bambu Studio, which was intelligently designed around a user workflow of import model, change settings, click print, with tabs and button placement located and highlighted mostly in that workflow or your objective order, this software, that's just not there yet. First, you load your design into one screen where you choose your image processing mode, or for vector designs, pick elements and choose which ones correspond to line work, fill work, or cut. Then you have to go to a second prepare screen to select your material type, take an image, set the height, then start mucking around with different elements of your design. And presently, due to what I can only describe as inefficiencies in pathing and ordering logic, going back and forth between the main screen and the prepare screen and the preview function, just to make sure it's not going to do a silly thing like an outer perimeter cut before an engrave, which it frequently did no matter what order I put the layers in. So personally, I think this workflow does need a bit of an overhaul. I don't think there's any need for two screens when we should just be able to snap a picture in the main design area and set up the height measurement from there. And the UI should encourage that work order. So honestly, in terms of software workflow, Creality have done a better job here so far. But where I've previously described Creality as having more features that are 70% complete, Bambu are far more in the camp of having fewer features, but those features being closer to 90% complete. So whilst the workflow isn't up to their own standards, and yes, in fairness, if there is anything we can trust to come from Bambu in the future, it's an incredibly user-friendly software experience. There are already some elements that are absolutely bang on and some that are pretty wow, such as when you put a material in the machine. Many Bambu official materials have a QR code in the corner, so when you snap a picture, the software can automatically recommend the correct profile. And on materials, there's a lot there already, pretty much everything that Bambu sells, including their own plastics. I'll come back to that in a moment, but another thing to point out is when selecting an engrave type or a cut type, you just mouse wheel over the two main settings in the bottom left corner of speed and power to see a preview of the result you're looking for. And if a material isn't already available from Bambu's library, such as slate in my case, you can create your own. And this is one of the best implementations of this feature I've ever seen, because you can easily create a test grid in the software, engrave that to see the results, but then you use the bird's eye camera to snap a pic of that result and generate your own preview grid. Or you can even snap a higher resolution pic on a phone or camera and import that. This is probably the best implementation of material setup I've ever seen. This is the sort of sensible workflow we expect from Bambu. And when it comes to aligning a job on previously used material, it's also been pretty successful in determining where existing holes and marks are and putting the new job in an empty usable space. And before you can even do your first laser job, it makes you watch a video on laser safety and operation, which is an incredibly smart thing to do. But again, more on laser safety shortly. Because I want to touch on a couple of elements in the marketing I haven't been able to test yet. The rotary tool is just a module I don't have, so I can't test that. But then they talk about a contactless 3D mesh, which is meant to use the LiDAR to scan objects with variable height elements so it can accurately laser things at different heights in one job. That's just not a process I could find. And then the ability to print something in 2D and intelligently detect it and cut out its perimeter is another feature that currently eludes me. And we also have to be conscious that unlike pretty much every other laser device out there, there's no LightBurn support for this one. So for more advanced jobs, we do need to wait for Bambu to implement it down the line. And those jobs include things like depth engravings, or even just the ability to adjust the laser's resolution, such as the line thickness or number of lines per inch. But again, due to Bambu's history, I've no doubt that the functionality of this will one day rival even Xtool, and some features are already slap my ass and call me a amazing. The present workflow being weaker than Creality's approach, though, is something I had to point out and I just couldn't ignore. So I guess look forward to updates. I expect this will become better after you buy it. It's not a letdown, it's not that you can't use it, but having used other laser machines and other Bambu machines, I am left using this scratching my head, knowing that there could have been a better way. Now, I want to talk about this air purifier before we conclude on maintenance, safety, and well, conclude. This add-on box is basically a massive impeller at the bottom of a chamber that sucks in a lot of air through a few filters. Now, I genuinely don't know if this keeps us 100% safe from all the nasties and fumes produced by lasering. And with these so often being called smoke filters rather than air purifier, I would check what materials you plan on cutting and check what they give off, and then check whether these filters can filter these things out. I really don't want to make a recommendation on laser safety. and be wrong. For ultimate safety, I'll be venting from this to outside as soon as I'm able to drill another 100mm hole in my wall. Now, connection wise, this is a simple box: hose inlet at the top and an outlet on the bottom. The power socket's on the back with a power switch next to it. But here is what is, yep, it's stupid. Sorry Bambu, but this is daft. And I don't mean the locks for wheels made out of a material that easily slides across smooth surfaces. You see, on the front is a dial which is an analog control for fan speed. Now, I've seen more expensive filters that have got a Bluetooth connection to the laser machine and intelligently spin up when the laser's on and shut off when it's off, but they cost double the price of this. This one is manual, which is fine for its price, but the stupid thing is that this dial on the front sets a fan speed from slow to fast. There's no off on this front dial, and every other unit like this that I've tested, just after the slowest speed is one final click to turn it off. So unless you give this thing a reach around, the fan will always be spinning. Now I know it's a small thing to whinge about, but come on Bambu, you're better than this. Now finally, safety. This is listed as a Class 1 device, which infers that it's safe to operate as a standalone unit under normal operating conditions. Now, whilst you can send jobs via Wi-Fi, you can't actually operate it and start a job remotely. You must hold down this button on top to start any laser work, because that prevents you starting a potentially fire-starting job when you're not even in the room. As we mentioned earlier, it's also got an e-stop. It also has the opaque lid and door intended to block laser light, and if you open this door at any point during a job, the machine will instantly stop lasering. And since this green plastic is dark, making it hard to see into the chamber, you do actually get a live preview on the screen during jobs, so you can actually see what's happening. And you can also monitor this on the desktop suite app and the unfortunately named Bambu Handy phone app. I say that, I'd love a Bambu Handy. I keep giving them one. But since this is so dark, I do wish we could get this preview screen during prints too. And also, since I'm wishing for stuff, I wish it'd record laser jobs, like a laser version of a time-lapse. Anyway, if you do manage to start a fire inside the chamber, which I did by circumventing the lockouts using magnets, there are tons of sensors that will detect both the flames and the heat, and that will cause the machine to shut off, leaving nothing happening but an alarm blaring, and maybe the fire still burning. And that's something you need to be aware of, that can and does happen with laser machines. Bambu's suite is built to handily give you warnings when you're using more flammable materials. However, even with all this stuff, if you ask any laser safety expert, they'll probably tell you that no matter what, you should still be wearing laser safety glasses every time you operate a laser device. They are, of course, your last line of defense between component failure and going blind. Now, Bambu does sell laser glasses, I don't have them, but they say they are OD5 rated for the diode laser wavelength and OD6 rated for the wavelength used in IR lasers, which is why I'll infer they do have an IR module coming, and that will let us do things like depth engrave on metals and basically true engraving on metals, which is something you can't really do well with diode lasers. But I'm going to hope it's at least a 20-watt laser if or when they release it. What I don't know is if Bambu's glasses are externally certified, so until then I'm going to stick to glasses I've personally chosen to trust. I've got a video coming soon on my understanding of laser safety, but it'll be a good place for anyone who's thinking of getting into lasers to start. Now finally, maintenance. As I've said, lasers give off smoke, particulates and other gunk. A lot of this is going to get caught in the cutting tray or sucked out by the big exhaust fan in the back, but over time this can accumulate on the mechanics of the device, so yeah, that can affect its operation altogether. Now with the latest firmware, the printers should provide regular maintenance updates telling you what to clean and when to clean it depending on what jobs you've been running. But it is worth having a look on Bambu's maintenance webpage to get an idea of what steps you'll need to perform in order to do a full clean. Maybe having a separate device for laser jobs would be easier, but of course I'm assuming that you've got the space for 2 large devices. But okay, here's the thing. When I first saw this, my attitude was very much, I want a printer to be a printer. I don't need it to be a laser, a cutter, and a plotter. Heck, why not stick a drill on the end and just make it a CNC too? But as I've started reviewing laser machines, I have got bitten by the bug for lasers and the tasks it can perform. And right now, I think for most people, the inclusion here will be looked at as somewhere between an unnecessary add-on and a gimmick. After all, one of the first things I did was engrave bamboo onto bamboo using my bamboo, just to be that daft. But one of the standout features of Bambu as a brand is one of the things that I find it hard to both articulate and show, because you've got to get hands-on with it against other devices to understand it. But it's around how it's going beyond the it just works approach and the typically intuitive workflow that, yeah, in fairness, hasn't reached maturity here. It's the platform. MakerWorld is growing beyond just a repository of tools, and even now makes model editing and creation more accessible to the masses. And the more we start to see these multi-medium projects creep up, like cork insoles for TPU shoes, or a clock with wood elements, or this Google Home holder with a wood topper, the less we have 3D printed tat in our house, and the more we can see this stuff as actual furniture. Let's be fair, a lot of the time when you've got 3D printed elements as decoration, your mates come round and go, oh, that's cool, but then kind of shrug at it when they see it's 3D printed, because up close, let's be fair, 3D prints look It's like cool tat, but it's still tat. I think this is going to grow with time. So I think it's really good that there's a rather fairly priced upgrade path. If you decide to buy in later, well, the H2D now is $600 cheaper as a combo without the laser than the version that's laser ready. But with the upgrade kit at only $531, I think the way to look at this is, if you buy it as a laser now rather than later, then that's going to cost you an extra $69 over upgrading it, but you get the cutter and plotter thrown in. And who doesn't like the idea of an extra $69 that you're spending? Anyway, the cutter and plotter is something I'll be covering in my next video, so please subscribe so you don't miss that. So let's say you are interested. When it comes to deciding between 10 watt and 40 watt, and I guess by that also deciding between the H2S or H2D, I mean, the 40 watt is, sure, nice to have. It's incredibly expensive and it's more powerful. But the point of this is to allow for deeper material cutting. And you'll also most definitely be wanting to push smoke outside with one of those. But you also need to be aware that the beam is wider. Typically, lasers have a 0.1 to 0.15mm beam on 10 watt lasers. A 40 watt would start at 0.15 and go to around 0.25mm, which makes the 10 better for surface engraving if you're wanting the finest detail. It's kind of like larger print nozzles. Bigger ones are faster at the cost of some quality. 40 watt really is for bulk cutting jobs. And for a cutting area that is relatively very small, now that I've looked at it, I think it's overkill for a 3D printer, but some people will want it. Personally, I hope they make a 20 watt module and one that's compatible with more H2 machines than just the H2D. And I'd also like to wish for infrared options too, since we're, hoping for stuff. I'm sure that's coming. I'm sure that's why they picked the green cover and the glasses. But that's it. That's Bambu lasers in a nutshell. I expect in the future, if this does take off, or even if it doesn't, Bambu are probably entering the laser game with this. It'd be nice to see what they can do with just a laser device on its own. Now this, as a combo unit, it's certainly not for everyone, and it's more certainly not for right now. But I expect the more we see creators making designs with laser elements in mind, the more people will be intrigued to pick this up. Bambu have, in fairness, started paving a solid path for a future where one machine is just what they said it'd be, a home manufacturing hub. They have work to do for sure, and I know this video will still generate a lot of comments from anti-Bambuers, and everyone is welcome to their view. It's why I have a comment section for exactly that. Share away. But I'm genuinely more interested to see where we are in about a year from now, so we can look back and determine how well this side of the technology was adopted by the community. What do you think will happen? Where do you think it's going to go? Is this the future, or is this just a fad? Let me know in the comments, and as always, if you do decide to pick up a Bambu machine, like in any review I do, I make my income off your use of my affiliate links in the video description and first comment. There's no cost to you, but I make a commission on every sale after you click those links, no matter what you buy. So, wouldn't you kindly click them before making a purchase? I want to say thanks for watching, with a huge thanks to our members who are on screen now. Please consider joining them. That also supports the channel. You get your name in lights, Discord roles, early access, and exclusive videos. Until next time, I have one simple request, and that is to have sharks with frickin' laser beams attached to their heads. Fohammer out.